Hi, my name is Madeline and welcome to my loose watercolor ocean tutorial. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll likely have heard of the Paint Your Style challenge that I am a part of alongside 8 other co-hosts. This challenge started out as a way for us to practice watercolor together while maintaining our own artistic voices, and it has grown into this wonderful community filled with lovely artists that paint along every week. My co-host and I are planning how to celebrate this anniversary as a group, and individually, I thought it would be fun for myself to repaint some of our past reference images, starting today with the very first one. This is how I painted this reference photo in July of 2022. And this is how I painted it today, exactly 1 year later. As we start off, I want to share the watercolor supplies that I use. Feel free to pause the video and read through the list. Right now, I am taping down my watercolor paper with some masking tape. Now that everything is taped down, I'm going to grab some masking fluid and a silicone brush, and I'm going to just paint off the white sails of the sailboat that we see on our landscape reference. I like using silicone brushes when I'm just having to mask off a really tiny part of my paper. I feel like it's just quick and easy, and this specific brand of masking fluid, PBO or PBO, the thing that I like about it is that you can actually use a hot air tool on it and it won't sort of like destroy the paper underneath. I am all about using my hot air tool. I feel like it speeds watercolor up and just makes things so much more easy. Now I'm going to tape off my horizon line, and then I'm going to be grabbing my 2-inch flat brush, and we are going to wet the upper half of our landscape, and we'll paint the sky wet on wet. One of the things that I didn't like about this painting that I did a year ago was I wasn't in love with the colors that I chose. So for today, we are going to just be using 2 blues, a light blue and a darker blue. And I'm going to sort of give this painting more of a monochrome feel. So I am using a blue that has a pretty light value, and we're going to start just by darkening the upper half of our sky. What I did last year was I think I painted the sky with maybe like a cobalt teal color and then the ocean with an ultramarine, and I just feel like the 2 blues didn't really complement each other. So if you don't have the colors that I'm using specifically, which you don't need to use the same ones I'm using, I would either maybe use just one color of blue and then sort of dilute it to get the lighter values, and then use it in a little bit more concentrated for the darker values. In the reference photo, there is like the slightest hint of a cloud right above the middle of the mountains. So I'm just going to grab a paper towel and I'm going to lift up just a tiny bit of paint. The sky isn't very dark to begin with, but I just wanted that sort of subtle cloud feel. And then now we're going to dry this layer. And then now we're going to start painting the mountains. I'm going to grab the same blue that I used for my sky because the mountains that are like furthest from us are pretty light. So I'm going to start on the right side. I'm going to go up and then I'm going to go all the way across. And then now I'm going to rinse my brush and I'm just going to lightly bring that color down. And now we can dry this first layer of mountains. And then to paint the second layer of mountains, I'm going to grab a little bit of the darker blue. And then I'm going to start by painting the little slither of dark mountains kind of on the right. And then I'm going to start with the other side on the left-hand side of the landscape. My tip for staying loose with mountains while sort of preventing them from looking kind of like unrealistic is to sort of really slightly vary that like upper edge that we create with our brush. So if we were to create kind of like one smooth sort of like rainbow-ish shape, then I find that the mountain kind of doesn't look as realistic. So I just used like the tip of my round brush and I just sort of make like little ridges or notches that sort of like signify the ridges of the mountains. And I just try to kind of make some parts of the mountain tops a little bit darker and then other parts a little bit lighter. And on the reference image, there's kind of like some fogginess on this side, so I'm just going to take a wet brush and pick up any of those sharp lines. And now I'm just sort of dropping a little bit of the darker blue on some parts of the mountain. I like how that looks, so I'm going to dry this layer. Now I'm going to peel off the masking tape for the horizon line, and I accidentally ripped off some of the masking fluid. I wasn't able to get it to stay, so I'm just going to sort of redraw what I had before the masking tape kind of took it off. And then now I'm going to grab my flat brush again and I'm going to wet the lower half of our landscape. And be careful as we wet close to the horizon line. You want to be careful not to introduce water in the upper half of our landscape because it'll cause blooms on our nicely painted and dried mountains. I'm picking up the same blue that I used to paint our sky, and I'm going to slowly build the depth that we have with our ocean. So another thing that I didn't love about my first time painting this piece is I felt like my ocean was like really smooth and kind of lacked the depth and texture that I think you would see with like an ocean and the space that you see between where the photo's taken and that first set of mountains. So I'm going to try today to give this oceanscape a little bit more depth and texture. So now I'm grabbing the darker blue and I'm sort of darkening the very bottom of the photo that is closest to us. And then I'm just grabbing both blues and I'm sort of making what we would see as like the waves. And I think keeping the most bottom part of the landscape darkest is going to help with creating that depth. I like how that looks, and I'm going to dry this layer. And I've been sort of obsessed with metallic accents lately, so I'm going to use these two blue metallic paints to kind of create some shimmers and sparkle that we would see in an ocean. And I'm grabbing this cheap liner brush that I have, and I'm just going to paint some like water waves. So I'm actually not loving what I did here. I think I might have overdone it and spaced them out a little bit too much. So I'm going to grab my round brush again, and I'm going to grab the lighter blue, and I'm just going to sort of come in and kind of give more sort of wave looking shapes and kind of break up how poorly spaced those metallic accents are. I'm going to add some darker blue at the bottom. And that actually doesn't look terrible. I feel like I might have saved it a little bit. I'm just smoothing out some of the edges on the top, but I like that, so I'm going to dry this layer. Now I'm going to grab some white gouache and my little liner cheapy brush and paint some sort of like glistening watermarks. I think the official word for this is called glints. It's a word I actually learned this year, but I think that's like the official name of the little like white speckles you see on water when it like reflects the sun. And if you already knew that, you don't have to tell me. You just are smarter than me. I am still learning new words in my 30s. Now I'm gonna dry this layer. And so I grabbed my gum eraser and I'm going to take off that masking fluid. And I'm going to grab the same brush that I've been using to sort of paint these fine lines here on the ocean. And I'm just going to grab some black and I'm going to outline the sailboat. And then now I'm going to paint the body of the sailboat. And then I'm going to use some whitewash and paint some of the little city highlights that we see here. And then going to come in with the darker blue and add just a tiny more. And then last but not least, my favorite part, we are going to add a flock of birds flying to the left. And my tip for staying loose with birds is to use a really fine liner brush, some very, very watery dark paint, and I just sort of make like a diagonal upwards line. I feel like that looks the most natural in my opinion. Let's dry those little birdies. And we are all done. You can slowly peel off the masking tape once everything has completely dried. And I love this piece so much more than my first one. I like the little shimmer highlights and overall it just looks so much better. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked this tutorial, please hit the like button. It's a really small way to help my channel grow. And if you enjoy my content, use the following QR codes to either find me on Patreon or Instagram.